Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. We certainly appreciate that. We will be starting in just a few minutes at 3 after. So we'll just hold for a little bit and start in a moment. Thank you. Again, for those that are just joining, we appreciate your time today. We look forward to the webinar, and we'll start in just a couple of minutes. We will start in 1 minute. Thank you, everyone, for participating today. Okay, let's go ahead and start. Thank you, everyone. We certainly appreciate you joining the call, the webinar today, setting the new standard for customer experience, the role of insights in fraud prevention. We're very glad to have you. We look forward to the speakers and to the content that they will bring. So in today's webinar, Sonata and Microsoft will discuss the complete customer journey and how every component of that journey can lead to a more cohesive customer experience and increased loyalty. So let me introduce today's speakers. We have Hanimant Teneti, who is the head of 365, Dynamics 365 at Sonata. Chandra Stevens, Global Director of Emerging Solutions for Customer Experience. Sandra Feinberg, Global Sales Lead at Microsoft, as well as Srinivas Vupala, the head of product engineering and digital services. So again, thank you speakers for being here, and thank you audience. We certainly appreciate your time. At the end, we'll have 15 minutes for questions and answers. However, if you have a question during the presentation, please feel free to just put it in the chat, and we'll be sure to get to it at the end of the presentation. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. And without any further ado, I will pass the presentation over to Srini.
Good morning. And I think Marissa has given a great introduction to this session. This is about how you create great customer experience. And every company's mantra today is about how do we create growth. And growth often is done only through by giving great customer experience. And what we have done here is we wanted to explain how we as a team can help you with your customer experience and then help your company grow. The way we are trying to plan this session is that I just want to show you something that that is a typical customer experience, but it has been this customer experience that you see on slide is primarily tailored to whatever is the immediacy of what we are going to present today. Primarily, we feel that when we talk about customer experience, it's also about the right insights that you need to have to be able to create that customer experience. On the other side, it's also to prevent the kind of issues and then the kind of fraud that can happen to the customer because we have put something on site and people have to interact with this entire process. So the two great things that we will try to explain today is one, how do you ensure that your customer experience is not doesn't get into problems or is become problematic for them in terms of interacting with you. And the second one is, how do we ensure that we have right kind of insights for you to be able to identify right things for your customer and then improve or increase their experience or better their experience with your interactions. So what we see here is that there are primarily, because we deal with, to begin with, we'll deal with the fraud aspects, and then after that we'll deal with the customer insights aspects. To begin with, identity. How do you ensure that your customer identity through the process of their purchase with you, and then ensure that their purchase is great with you, and then ensure that the post purchase you are able to give them the right kind of confidence and the right kind of recommendations for them to be able to continue loyally with you. These are the key aspects that we are trying to do. If you go to the next slide, what we are trying to do is in the next few minutes, we're going to talk about these two great products that we have that can help you in achieving this kind of an objective of ensuring that you not only prevent the fraud that can happen on your customer, but also ensure that you identify right kind of elements about the customer, their behavior elements, as well as their transaction elements with you, and then identify right insights for them to be able to provide them the great experience. So I'll hand over to Sandra to start with the first part, which is the fraud prevention part.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we're really here to help and partner with you, really understand how to protect your revenue and your brand. How do you limit your fraud exposure? And how do you grow your business safely and securely? And with all three categories, it really boils down to what is the impact of fraud on your business? Next slide, thank you. So the impact of fraud and abuse, when we take a look at the customer journey, it's typically done in phases. And when you look at the customer phases, you have to look at where fraudsters like to insert themselves. So let's say in the identity phase, these are where people are creating fake accounts, and fraudsters abuse offers, improper discounts and rewards that are meant for genuine new users. And then astroturfing, are they publishing fake reviews? Are they publishing harassment and just abusive information? When we take a look at the account compromises, fraudsters access and sell customer information and make unauthorized profile updates and commit payment fraud. So it's important to have a tool that at the beginning, when somebody is actually logging into their rewards or their loyalty or your website, that you can identify them as a good user. And then the customer journey phases over to purchase. Once they look at your website and decide they do want to make a purchase, then what happens? Well, fraudsters typically use stolen payment instruments for unauthorized purchases. And then rewards frauds. Rewards are digital money. That costs you as a merchant dollars. So we want to make sure that we protect against fraudulent rewards and discounts being used. And then obviously discount fraud. And this is really where the fraudsters are faking eligibility. Even if you have a subscription type service, we want to be able to maintain that the people who are subscribing and then selling their subscription to others, make sure that only the good customers have access to your websites. And then we focus on the post-purchase. Returns fraud, fraudsters making ineligible returns, fraudsters and exchange fraud. So they're basically abusing refund policies. I'll give you a quick example. Now, Walmart will accept up to $15,000 a day with no receipts. So what fraudsters will typically do, they like to collude with employees. So they'll order something online or call customer service, order something online, and then they'll use a fake payment method and then do next day shipping or 2-hour shipping, and then they'll return it in store for cash. So it's really important to have a tool that can identify fraudulent behavior externally, but also fraudulent behavior internally with your employees as well. Next slide, please. So you may ask, well, how does Microsoft accomplish this? What kind of system is in place? Well, Microsoft Dynamics 365 Fraud Protection helps e-commerce, brick and mortar, and omnichannel merchants to protect their revenue and reputation by utilizing adaptive AI technology that continuously learns about evolving fraud patterns. When we take a look at that customer journey, we said there's 3 phases where there's also 3 capabilities within the solution. Account protection, and this is all about safeguarding user accounts from abuse and fraud by combating fake account creation, account takeover, and fraudulent account access. This has to do with bot protection and device fingerprinting. Both of those capabilities are included at no additional charge. Purchase protection. This is all about helping the acceptance rates of e-commerce transactions. So lowering your false positives, increasing your bank acceptance rates, reducing fraud loss and checkout friction. It's just as important to know who your good customers are as it is to know who those fraudsters are. So we want to make sure that we have a solution that's payment method agnostic. So it doesn't matter if somebody's using a credit card, a debit card, a bank transfer, digital gift card, even Bitcoin, you're still protected against that. And then finally, loss prevention. This is really about identifying anomalies and potential fraud on returns and discounts arising from omnichannel purchases, enabling you to take quick action to mitigate losses. This is all about employee behavior, what is normal, what is anomalous, how they are interacting with your customer base to make sure that both your fraudsters and anomalous employees are being checked in place. With that, I will turn it back to you.
Thanks a lot, Sandra. This is Hanumant here, and so let me what I'll do in the next couple of minutes is to try to go into more detail into each of these specific areas that Dynamics 365 fraud protection handles. So first, let me talk about account protection, and as Sandra had mentioned, it is essentially ensuring that the user accounts that are getting created are free from abuse and from fraud, and then it helps the organizations to combat the fake accounts that are essentially getting created. Moving on to the next slide, this essentially is talking about the different aspects that could come into being when you look at a typical fake account creation and what is the impact that one would have in the whole process. So what you're seeing today is that there is a lot of bots that essentially are getting used to create these fake accounts, and then this essentially acts in 2 ways. One is that it creates an unnecessary load on your whole network, which essentially would mean that the genuine buyers, they are not handled, or they do not get an opportunity to do the actual transaction online, which essentially would lead to revenue loss and bad customer experience. Then the other thing what also happens is that in this whole process, there is also fraudsters who try to sell these fake accounts in the black market, and then this again makes a big issue from a user perspective. So what the system does from a fraud protection standpoint is that it does the check for account protection, where it does the check in terms of such fraudulent account creation. That so you are essentially trying to stop the problem at the first stage of the creation of such a fraudulent accounts. Moving on to the next slide, it's essentially an example or a case study of how a government organization which is into rolling out government benefits and services to the people, and then that essentially how it has helped. Essentially, only the account part of the fraud protection, how it has helped in terms of stemming the creation of these fraudulent accounts and leading this to 3 to 6 times of ROI, okay, that they were able to achieve, okay, because of right in the first month itself. And this essentially has led to a sizable amount of fraud loss, revenue loss that they were able to stop gap, or rather stop in the first place. Moving on to the next slide, this is essentially about purchase protection. So here, this is the next aspect of fraud that the system allows you to curtail or stop. In terms of purchase protection, this is essentially where you're looking at the whole transaction that is happening, and try to see that what are the different areas during a typical transaction that the customer may go through, and what are the places where you could have fraudulent aspects or fraudulent transactions, and how do you essentially curtail that. This is specifically more in vogue, or it will be more applicable when you're looking at it from an e-commerce transaction standpoint. Moving to the next slide. So essentially, this sort of gives you an example of what we term as wrongful rejection. So essentially, what happens is that, say, for instance, you have an e-commerce website and you have a customer who's trying to make a purchase. So what happens is that the customer goes through the whole checkout process, then submits the credit card or the card information in terms of the purchase. Now, what happens? This is then passed on to the bank, and in this whole process, one is that there could be rejection that can happen at the bank stage, which would mean that the customer cannot complete this whole purchase transactions, and which essentially means that a genuine customer there would be a scenario of they not being able to purchase, which then essentially leads to the customer dissatisfaction and aspects like that. Now what the system essentially does in such scenarios is that it essentially helps in terms of doing this validation of the transaction, which essentially is done much before, and then this essentially is then so that there's no wrongful rejection that is happening much later, which will ensure that the transaction doesn't get completed. Going to the next slide, which is essentially an example again of how a gaming company, which is typically an online gaming company, right, and what they have been able to do is because of this purchase protection solution that they have from Dynamics 365, right, they have been able to ensure that there's a 40% reduction, right, in terms of the fraudulent transactions. And this essentially also has ensured that because of the checks that are being done at the right stage much before it is essentially going to the bank, and because of that, your bank acceptance rates are also going up much higher. Right? This is essentially obviously leading to additional revenue which is being got by the organization. Moving further, this is essentially when you're talking about loss prevention, which is primarily looking at an omni-channel scenario, right, where you have cases where the procurement or the purchase is essentially being done online, and then you have a scenario where some part of the transaction is essentially being done through, say, an offline mode. So you may be purchasing it online and say you're doing a return offline. So in such scenarios, when how do you ensure that the data across both these systems, whether it's online and offline, is adequately ensured, that you ensure that this system, the systems are having the same information, so that when such a transaction is done, it does not lead to any fraud. Now, going to the next, where is essentially when you're looking at an example, right? What you could have is that, say, there is an offer or a discount or a promotion which is there online. So what essentially happens is somebody would buy that particular or do that particular purchase online, and then they go to the store for doing a return. So in this scenario, if the system is not adequately geared up to do such transactions, what happens is that the customer return that happens sometimes would happen on the full price, which essentially then leads to obviously loss in revenue and aspects like that. So that is the other area which the system essentially helps in terms of protecting, wherein you're looking at this omni-channel sort of scenarios. Moving further, what we have over here is again a retail company which has been able to do a reduction in fraud losses up to around 4 to 5%, which is essentially only by ensuring that the loss prevention functionality has been enabled for them. This across when you have multiple stores, and then there could be scenarios where you have store-based pricing. So somebody is procuring it in a particular store with a specific price, and then they are returning it in another store. So such scenarios which are there, which essentially they have been able to curtail by ensuring that in such cases where you have returns and aspects like that, it is essentially ensured that there's no fraudulent transactions which are essentially happening. So these are sort of the three basic, I would say, the pillars that are there in terms of how do you look at protecting from fraudulent transactions. So what we talked about is account protection, which is ensuring that the accounts that are getting created are current and fraudulent transactions are stopped. Then you have the purchase protection part of it, which is essentially in terms of ensuring that the purchase cycle is essentially, and it is protected so that you don't have any wrongful rejections and things like that. And the third is essentially the loss prevention part of it, which is essentially you're talking about from an omni-channel standpoint. So this is essentially what are the three areas that that fraud protection from Dynamics 365 offers. So now, having said this, let me then pass it back to Srini, who would then talk about that in this aspect where you're talking about how your customer insights is something that would help in terms of from a customer experience standpoint. Srini, back to you.
Thanks, Hanumant. What we are going to talk about now is that we just, as a part of customer experience, we typically talk about the aspect of building trust, right? So the fraud team, the fraud component that we just spoke about is about how do we build this trust. Now, the second part of the story is about how do we build this loyalty. And we spoke about why the customer experience is very important. And then one of the key critical things that if you notice is that the companies with superior valuation in the market are the ones which have given the great experience to their customers. And that's why it's very vital that you not only just build a trust, but you also start talking about how do we give great experience so that the loyalty is gained from the customer. So in this process, I just want to relate some 2-3 examples that we are facing in the market today. So one of the things, companies which are directly dealing with the customer, they're able to understand in what channels the customers are coming and how they can attract and acquire these customers as a part of their journey. And during this process, is there a way that I can understand the customer's behavior through these channels? And while understanding the behavior, is there a way I can actually understand their segments and their interests, and therefore cater to those segments and interests? One interesting example I can give here is that one of our customers had a specific product that was health product, and they realized that over time, as they started analyzing the behaviors, they realized that the people were ordering their products from primarily from gyms, the physical training places, and then they try to do some kind of survey as to why people are trying to buy from there, and they realize that those people are using their product in terms of making it a lot more protein rich diet for themselves. And then this led to that company innovating on their whey products, whey proteins, and then be able to give and service those kind of customers. So that's one area of how do you understand your customer while they're behaving or while they're interacting with you. The second example is a kind of a company which is a B2B company. They don't have direct interaction with the customer. They often wanted to do, because they are a company which is selling music equipment, and typically it is sold through the retail channels. And then in some way they want to get the customer's experience in terms of how the products are being used. And then in some sense wanted to recommend what kind of music is best heard in their equipment, and they wanted to do that kind of research. And to do that, they completely changed the way they operate. They became what they themselves call as a customer obsessed company. And then they try to look at how every interaction at the shop, at the service center, at the a call center, every interaction they trap, they capture the customers inputs, customer aspects. And they specially created another site which is about this customer community portal, and they're trying to take feedback about every product that's sold in the market. And then using that, they connected that to their R&D process. And then from the R&D process, they're able to create new products for the customer or solve problems which they think the customers are often complaining. And this is the kind of obsessiveness with which they are trying to work towards making sure that the right products reach their customer base. And then, having said that, again, the whole process is about this company trying to understand what is their customer journey, and this company trying to understand every touch point that customer has within their entire journey. And through this journey and through these touch points, they wanted to understand how their company is reacting and then how each department can relate to these particular touch points. And that's how they have started creating their systems. And that's what made them start looking at customer and then made them start looking at their own operations very differently. So having said that, if you look at the entire journey process here, we are looking at only 3 segments. This may not be the complete journey that we wanted to explain to you. I'm sure Chandra will talk about those experiences later. But idea is that attracting and growing and retaining are the 3 primary components of ensuring that you get the right insights in terms of making sure that those decisions are made. If I move to the next slide. So the way we will organize our thought in terms of this product is that there is a way you understand the human behavior based on the channels and based on the interaction points and based on touch points that you interact with. Then we look at how do we then make right decisions about what kind of people or what kind of audiences or what kind of customers are talking to you and are interacting with you. And then how do you then relate that to make sure that you have kind of right kind of engagement processes and the right kind of decisions are made to make sure that you engage with them. So having said that, I will hand over to Chandra. She will give you a lot more details about how do we ensure that through our product.
Thank you, Srini.
Chandra, over to you.
Yep, if we go to the next slide, thank you. So, when we think about this and we take it from even the lens of where we started with fraud, how did this all tie together to, right? So from understanding my customer, but through that whole process of detecting fraud and anomalies as well, that's to ensure I have a great customer experience. It's to make that customer experience frictionless. But the other thing is to build trust in that relationship and strengthen your relationship with the customer. So as part of what we do with customer insights, these are some of the key things you can do with the solution. So first of all, I need to understand my customer. So how do I get that 360 view of who they are? And typically the challenges are always around data. You probably have a lot of data silos within the organization. It's hard to get that single view of the customer. So how do I do that quickly, easily, without having to put undue strain on my IT department or even having to bring in some level of data scientists? So what we've done with customer insights is make it out of the box, easy to use. It's very much for marketing analysts, business analysts, or a data analyst. And so what we do, the first step is where we start to, get this 360-degree view of the customer. So we look across all the different data that you have, and through out-of-the-box connectors, start to bring that data in. Then we do what's called map, match, and merge, or M3. So that's where we are looking across the data, the format it comes in, and then we'll put it in a common data model format. So it's putting it in the same schema or same semantic language. So it's easy to use that data across the different sources as well. And then we can also continue to enrich that. So think about how much you can gather out of the data you have, your first party data, to understand your customers, but I want to continuously hydrate that so I know more and more. So where Srini talked about earlier too, being proactive, it's moving from what was typically reactive to proactive. And how do I do that is by really getting more of a clear view of that customer, not only with my own data, but with other enrichment data, which could be Microsoft Graph data that we provide, or other third parties such as Experian, Civic Science, and other data that you might subscribe to yourself. And then the next thing that we do is we apply intelligence on top of the data. So this is where we start to really get the insights out of the the data itself. And so we have out-of-the-box churn models, we have out-of-the-box next best product recommendations, we have subscription churn, transaction churn. And so what those do out of the box, again, no need to be a data scientist, I can run that against the unified profiles I've created, and the output will be, here are the key influencers driving that, for example, churn. So it could be there's been no interaction in the last 60 days, or there's been no web interaction or purchases in the last 60 days. So from there, I can go create a segment and take action against that. You can also build out your KPI measures and calculations through the tool. And I can also continue to extend the solution, which is a great thing. If you're using some Microsoft stack or other even third-party line of business applications, we can extend the data either into our own Azure machine learning and modeling or advanced analytics with our own Azure Synapse, or even export this and activate it into other marketing automation tools, customer service tools, and sales CRM tools as well. And that's how we think about activating this. So again, it could be through the Dynamics channels we have, through other line of business applications you have, but also think about being able to use this data and share it across the organization. So with Power BI, which is our visualization tool, you can collaborate across that data. You can share it out across the organization. If you're using Teams, you can embed the visualization in Teams and really collaborate, especially now in remote work and remote environments. And you can even extend this out into applications if you're, for example, depending on the type of industry or business you're in, but you can take these unified profiles, which we'll take a look at what that looks like, and put that in the palm of the hands of your sales associate or a person on the store floor or your sales rep or your insurance agent. So they can easily look up that profile and understand the person they're talking with and know what to talk about next or what to offer next. So if we go to the next slide, this is what that profile looks like. So after we take the different levels of ingesting that data, unifying the data, putting the insights and analytics on top of it, this is the output. So you'll see this actually within Customer Insights. And again, you can take this out into many other different visualization tools or activation points. But in this example, you see Patty. We found all the information about Patty. Here's her timeline of interactions from, different visits to either a store or branch, mobile app interactions if she used a rewards card. And then you can see the other, what you see in the color-coded bars, that's where we're using enrichment data. So we have our own Microsoft enrichment data that we bring in to show affinity. So for lookalike modeling, Patty looks like this other pool of people who have interest in these other brands or brand affinities here and other interests in these topics. So based on that, again, I can go create some really strong targeted segments to then go activate these. And you can see across here too, the different segments she's in, high customer satisfaction, grow curbside, credit card target. And we can also see things like potential churn score, how much she spent year to date, and the other products or store deals that you could offer up to her as well. Next slide. So how do we do this? So Customer Insights can be utilized in two different ways. It's a standalone SaaS solution, or if you're using Azure or Azure Data Lake and Storage, you can stand Customer Insights on top of your own Azure foundation. So in that scenario, you own and control and manage all your data. It's not going in a black box, so you have much more of that control and ownership of the data. And then what we do from there is, as I said earlier, we put the data that we ingest, we bring it in through out-of-the-box connectors. If you're familiar with Power BI or Power Query, that's how we do the ingestion. We put it in this common data model format. Again, same schema to use across the solution. And then we apply the machine learning that's embedded in the product on top of it. And what you start to generate then is what you see here too. I get that unified 360 view of the customer. I can start to do segmentation on top of that. That could be recommended segmentation that we do out of the box by looking across the data. You could create your own with rules, or you could also do what we call find similar. So it'll look across the segments you have and look across for opportunities where you can see overlap for potential other customers in your customer pool for lookalike or cross-sell, upsell opportunities. And you can also bring in information to this further advanced analytics and even take that into what we do with engagement insights, which are our digital analytics that we pick up the behaviors from your website, a mobile app, a connected device. So across all this, you can also start to see what that market basket looks like. And then again, as you see here, multiple ways to go then and activate that. It could be into my, marketing tools. It could be into Power BI, a mobile application, your line of business apps. We can even take these segments out and activate them directly into Google ads, Facebook ads, or even through LiveRamp for your paid advertising as well. So it's a really simple, quick means to get time to value out of your data and start using the data, putting in the hands of your business analysts, data analysts, and marketing analysts. So with that, I'm going to cover this one of our customer stories too. So Edible Arrangements, hopefully some of you are familiar with them. They are a retailer of, as you can see here, different types of food offerings, and also provide them as gifts. But what they really wanted to do was, they were looking across their e-commerce to really drive more activity through that, especially during COVID. So they wanted to understand more about the customers they have, those people who had typically come into the store, but also those who are ordering online. And they wanted to get a very clear understanding of who those people were. So they needed to create, first of all, a means to gather their data from the different data silos they had. So they utilized customer insights to point to those different data silos, bring that data in, and quickly do the analysis and output of that single view of the customer. They also started to look to extend it, though, with what we can do with Azure Synapse. So they brought in their operations data combined with that customer data to really utilize this not only just for customer experience, but make everybody's role within the organization the business of experience. Because I could also see and utilize this data across my operations data, my customer data to say, in finance, I need to make a decision. Maybe I keep a location open or I don't, or retrofit one of the actual physical locations based on these type of information as well. And so, as part of this then too, they started to take those insights out. They extended them out throughout the organization with Power BI. And then, the overall impact here was understanding their customers to be very proactive, land the right offer, the right promotion, or the value that the customer is looking for, right channel, right time, and really ensure that they drove more growth and revenue through their channels that were most effective during COVID time, and now as we come out of it as well. Next slide. So again, when you think about this, what are the key things to think about from an as I talked about, we have overall in customer insights, it's audience insights, which we just talked about, and there's also engagement insights. So engagement insights help even capture more data. As I said, it's our digital analytics. We can drop a pixel into a website, into your mobile application, or even into a connected device. So we'll start to pick up those different interactions across those channels, where a person's spending time, what they're clicking down on, where they're really going through, what levels of the actual website or that mobile application. And we start to bring that data in, and you can start to see more reports. So you can start to look at what a journey funnel looks like, because again, journeys are not linear anymore. There's starts and stops and pauses and restarts along the way. So it's really understanding more of that funnel of the journey and what's happening along that. So that's what we can also do with engagement insights. And then the final aspect of that too is being able to use that and bring that back into that user profile to continuously hydrate and update it in real time. So if we go to the next slide, this is another customer story. So in this case, Chipotle quick service restaurant, what they wanted to do is, in their scenario, they had a lot of people who we started the project with them before COVID. So they had a lot of people who were coming into the physical store locations, and they didn't have a means to understand who they were. They had a reward or loyalty app, but they did not know if the people coming in the store were actually using it or part of that membership. And so they wanted to capture, that audience. So in a means to do that, we started out with capturing data from their POS transactions. So we were able to look across the information on the POS transactions, so you could start to see a name potentially on a credit card or even the last 4 digits. So you capture that information to start building this unified profile. And then they also did what we talked about earlier, was enrichment, using that enrichment data. So not only did they use Microsoft enrichment data, but they also used Experian data. So Experian data could definitely put more names to those records as well to verify what we captured through the POS transactions to say, yes, this is, Chandra Stevens. And and this is her unified profile. So they continued to enrich it through those channels with our own proprietary Microsoft data to also see other lookalike characteristics for brand affinities and other interests I might have. And then through all this, they then really did this very personalized means to activate these campaigns and outreaches to the customers, especially as we then started to go into COVID to move them more to pick up curbside or delivery. So really understanding who these folks were made them much more able to drive that personalization and provide the means that people could still, get the food and the delivery service that they wanted from Chipotle. And so how they did a lot of the activation, just to wrap on this one, is they took the segments and put them into their paid advertising channels. So big for them were Facebook ads and taking the ads out there to really drive that engagement into that audience that they had as well. So next slide. So Srini, I'm going to pass back to you to close out here.
Yeah, thanks, Chandra. So I think we heard the platforms and the products that we offer to you in terms of ensuring that the great customer experience happens. We build trust, we build insights to make sure that there is a great loyalty that is built around the customer. But how do we go about doing it? And then the way that you realize is you obviously have to find all the aspects. So there was this glamour part of predicting, segmenting, and other things, but there is also the tough part, which is about collecting the data and then connecting the data. So the consulting is about, the envisioning process is about identifying those data, what is required for us to collect and what is required for us to connect. And that's is a first step that we do as a part of realization process. The second part is obviously to look at how we then use this data to feed into these products and then get some kind of insights, and then what else do we require to make sure that the Chandra was talking about enriching data. So how do we get this additional enriching data to make sure that the decisions or the information or the analysis that we are doing is better, and we can make better decisions using that. So that's about proving the insights and the data infrastructure. And then once that is done, I think it is about now realizing the full potential and you going about implementing the one insight after the other insight and making sure that you understand the customer profile, and then make sure that you have the right insights in terms of the basket analysis and those kind of predictions, and then use that for your decision making. So that's the approach that we see, that we can realize this customer insights and the customer experience to that. So what do we offer as a part of next steps is that, if you can go to the next slide, we see that the way we can make this much more valuable to you and much more personal to you is to make sure that we can actually explain the details of these products. These are the features. These are the details of how you can go about implementing through a kind of workshop. We have workshop processes for that. Apart from that, if you're convinced and you think that we can do something about this, we can actually do something like an assessment workshop and a POC where we can actually run some kind of insights for you. We can identify that as upfront, identify the right data for that, and then run the POC and then prove that the product and then the data environment can work for you, and then get you that insight that you require for. So having said that, we will now formally complete our presentation, but we would want to continue our interaction with you. We have chat windows where you can actually ask us questions, and then one of our panelists will definitely answer you. During this process, I will let Marissa talk about any other subsequent next steps. And while she's talking, you please type in your queries and we can try to answer that. Over to you, Marissa.
Thank you so much. Certainly appreciate that, Srini, Sandra, Chandra, and Hanumanth for that great content. It looks like we do have a few questions. So let me just get one of these here. Okay, the first question is, what role does customer insight play in executing any given marketing campaign? So if whoever wants to take this one regarding customer insights and how it might correlate with some marketing campaigns.
Chandra, you want to take this, or you want to take this? Okay, so let me take this question. So like Chandra was explaining through the profiling of the customer, and this 360 thing that she was trying to see. You based on the customer profiling and based on how you are segmenting these profiles into various micro segments and various use segments, various behavior segments, your ability to identify the candidates and your ability to target those candidates for a specific process is there, and then using that and then connecting that with any of your marketing automation software or your marketing processes or any other processes or your CRM process, you can actually then run a campaign against that particular target segment for that particular person, whatever you identified or you perceived as their needs, and then as their elements that you need to target for.
Thank you, Srini. Another question for the speakers is, will these solutions integrate with non-Microsoft solutions? So do they play well with others? Yes.
So while I think I'll answer, but maybe I'll let the other panelists also answer this. But these products are fairly independently created. The architecture is fairly open for any kind of data sources to interact and integrate. And so, like Chandra was talking about, this, you can implement this in two ways: as a product or as a part of your Azure infrastructure, where you have your own data lake. That means it can work with any kind of data sources, any kind of data sets, and then of course it has got certain kind of capabilities pre-built into it, so you are able to get those things upfront. And if you want to customize and you want to build further information and you want to do further analysis, you want to add further algorithms, you can obviously do that. So that's the benefit of this entire product.
Thank you. And I believe I have one more question here. It states, will the fraud protection solution, does it scale and adapt to changing fraud environments?
So Hanuman, do you want to answer this question? Sandra, go ahead,
Sandra.
So yes, I'll address both questions. Just so you know that with loss prevention for in-store retail fraud, if you are a commerce customer today, we're able to pull the POS data right from the systems. So that's a great advantage to the dynamic solution. If you're not a commerce customer today, we can set up a secure portal for them to upload their data. So working with Sonata, we'll be able to create that for them very easily, as was mentioned, within a day. So it's quite easy. As far as the fraud protection and being able to adapt to changing trends and changing fraud events, that's exactly what adaptive AI is meant to do, right? So when we see fraud happening somewhere in the network, we can immunize you against it. And that's the beauty of Microsoft. Think about how many data points are being fed into what we call connected knowledge network, or the network graph. So you have Microsoft information. We protect all of Microsoft's businesses, in addition to things like Xbox and such. So you have a huge data set being fed into there. But we have customers from all across the globe, all across various industries: state governments, national governments, retail, gaming, travel, restaurants. So there's a wide swath of information. So that enables us to adapt quickly, because if we see a fraud trend in another vertical, we can stop it from happening in other verticals as well. So yes, we're completely adaptable to emerging threats.
Thank you so much. And there is actually, I have one more question here. Is the Connect knowledge available free of cost with CI and fraud modules?
So with fraud protection, it is very important for compliance purposes, not for us to, let's say, extend credit to anyone. We risk score every entity individually. So it would be up to the customer to take those fraud scores that we provide to them, and then utilize either accepting that entity to do something on their website or do something with their loyalty, or any type of customer insight. So as a fraud protection provider, we're here to protect the merchants, not necessarily make decisions for what kind of insights or programs people can be a part of. So they would have to ingest our scores, and then they can do with it what they see fit at that point in time.
Okay. Thank you so much. So appreciate those questions. If there are other questions that you have that you may not have asked, just please feel free to contact us and we'll be happy to answer those at a later time. So I think if there's, nothing else, I believe this concludes the webinar. Please feel free to contact either Chandra or myself, and you see our contact information there on the screen. We're happy to answer your questions or point you in the right direction. Certainly appreciate your time for the audience and of course the presenters for that great content. Thank you so much. So this does conclude the presentation, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.